Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Milia Islamajid and I serve as the Executive Director of the Interfaith Council. Again, I apologize, I know I have a mask on my face. I'm actually outside and away from the office. But I wanted to welcome all of you guys to our Courageous Conversation for this month. As you know, for those who are regulars at this, for our program, we actually have Marietta Fong, who's a board member of the SCIC, who usually leads this conversation every month. She herself is also OA on some family matters. And so today we're actually really blessed to have our current president, Susan Brooks, lead the conversation today, but I'll introduce her in just a little bit. But before I do that, I would like to introduce you guys to Cheryl Benz, who is our office administrator. And Cheryl will just kind of go through some of the logistics and guidelines of the program. And then if you have any questions about that, just please do let us know. So Cheryl, I'm going to hand it over to you. And you're on mute.
You would think we would know these things by now, huh? Okay, so today we're Zooming. And even though we've been Zooming for a year and a half, it still can be challenging. So please remain muted. And we're going to have a conversation between Susan and Aziza. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to chat them to Susan, or you can raise your hand, and you can find that raise your hand in the reactions menu down at the bottom, and then there's just a little raise your hand or raise hand. We're recording today, and so if you're looking at your, if you're in gallery view, then others will see you, and it's best if you have a light on in front of you and not behind you. And of course, this is always an adventure, so please be patient with us. So thank you.
All right. Did everyone hear that okay? Yeah? Okay. So it must be just my phone. We were a little low on mute, Cheryl, but I heard you okay. So today, we have a really special organization, and the executive director of that organization who is part of this Courageous Conversation. And this organization is called NewGround, and we'll definitely learn a lot more about it during the duration of this time. But I want to express my gratitude to Aziza Hasan for taking the time out of her very busy schedule, especially right now, to be with us and to be part of this conversation. We felt it was really something that we should have, and a conversation that should be taking place right now at this time. So we were really grateful for you to be with us. So before we introduce Aziza, I'm actually going to introduce you to SCIC's president, the amazing Susan Brooks. And she herself, she's just recovering from this massive surgery where, I think we can call her the bionic woman now. She has so many interesting metal pieces in her legs, but we're so grateful, Susan. Thank you for being here, and thank you for leading this conversation. And Susan she's been with the council for 2 years now. And like I said, this year she is the current president, and she is a member of Temple Beth El, which is housed in San Pedro. So Susan, before I give it over to you, I do want to remind everyone that at the end of the program, we'll also have an opportunity where we can engage in questions and answers, as well as Cheryl will share some flyers of some of our upcoming events as well. And those of you who are regular know that we usually have this program the first Friday, but because of some logistical issues, we have to have it the second Friday this month. But coming next month, we'll return to the first Fridays of every month from 3 to 5 p.m. Of our Courageous Conversations. So Susan, thank you, and I hand it over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Amelia. And yes, it has been a challenging year for many of us in ways I never imagined. But it's my pleasure today to be able to lead this conversation, as I am an alumni of NewGround, and I'm currently in their Courage Accelerator program, where we are looking at issues of racism both in our society and within our own faiths. So I've gotten to know Aziza over the last couple of years. I admire her very much. The work she does is so important. She is the executive director of NewGround, but she has facilitated a lot of other groups. She spent time with AmeriCorps. She served with the President Obama's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partners, and she's serving as an Interfaith Advisory Council member for Mayor Eric Garcetti right now. She also has worked as a mediator and done some really amazing things that would take us all day to talk about. But we're here to talk about NewGround, and so excited to have you with us, Aziza. My first question for you to get our audience better acquainted is, what is the central mission of NewGround, and how did it come to be?
Thank you for that warm introduction, Susan and Amelia. I am grateful to be here with you. Grateful for a lot of reasons that I think we'll unpack in the next, in our time together. NewGround believes in transforming community through the power of relationship. We believe that difficulty, that tension, that conflict, that the points of disagreement are a natural part of being in human relationship. And that when we are stuck, it's also a choice to be stuck, and that we can also choose to work internally within ourselves and with our friends to find another path together, no matter what our histories are. And so that's what we do. We focus on building relationships so that we can truly find a way through them and figure out how to build together. And so we do that specifically with Muslims and Jews. And like, this is a skill set that we believe in, that is just part of relationships. So it really translates, our work translates to a lot of other places as well, because ultimately it's about what's the kind of world that we want to be a part of building, that is possible, that isn't happening right now. And we do all sorts of other stuff, sorry, before you unmute. So we do that in all sorts of ways. So we have a program for professionals. You also talked about the Courage Accelerator, which is actually something that we built up this last year, that builds from people who went through the 10-month fellowship for professionals, had the opportunity to apply to something called the Courage Accelerator, which is continued really deep dive into some of those differences, and specifically around bias work and how to work through it, and then in ourselves and within our communities. We have an important event coming up next week that I hope everyone will be at, on Wednesday, and I'll make sure to put that in the chat, or maybe I can ask one of my team members who are here to Saneem and Andrea facilitate, and really lead our programming. We have a program for high school students, and I sit at a lot of different tables. I'm a Civil and Human Rights Commissioner at the LA City, and county tables and other tables. And the whole idea is, if we can put our brains together, we can figure out a way through this, and we can make a difference together. But we have to be willing to show up and to be at a table and be willing to continue when it's hard to do that.
Indeed. And I can say, having been part of the professional program, the skills that I gained through that program have just opened doors for me, have broadened my experience in the world and how I interact. It's just an amazing program. Now, we know in the past year, now going on a year and a half, we've had many challenges. We've had to pivot our world to online and Zoom. The NewGround programs are really, the more intense programs are designed to be in person, face to face, so that we really connect with people. So we know that's been an issue. And then also dealing with Jews and Muslims this year has been, in the last couple months, has been extremely trying, with increases in conflict in the Middle East and just the political arena that we're in. So I'd ask, what programs do you think have been most impactful? And can you give us some examples of the journeys taken, the relationships that are developed and ongoing, that help us, help NewGround and help all of us who have come out of the program continue this work?
Yeah, absolutely. look, a lot of what we do is about not only skills building, but also building muscle to be able to continue to have conversations and lots of practice and experience with it. So it doesn't just stop at one skill. It's part of an ongoing conversation with yourself and with other people. And so, like, to be the beginning of your question, like we knew this year going online, we could still build relationships with people. We knew it was possible, and it would just be different. And so that's why we chose that this last year, we had to go completely online just to make sure everyone was safe and to have integrity just as an organization. We didn't want to put anybody in harm's way, and we knew that it would be hard to do it. And so we reached out to a lot of different people and said, okay, how are you doing this effectively? And we got some really great advice from a lot of people who were just incredible and also in this work. And so we made the decision that we would invest in our alumni, people who'd already gone through, but who were willing to really dive in a lot more deep. And that's why the Courage Accelerator happened. It's also a multi-month program, and if you attend next week on Wednesday from 7 to 9, you'll get a taste of the outcome of that. And we know that, like, online, smaller groups, breakout groups, all these things are really essential pieces of how we can continue to have a conversation. And so we've done some of our own experimentation. But I would say, like, what really is at the heart and soul of our work and what is effective is relationship. It's relationship and people being able to come back and say, I'm really challenged right now. I am so challenged. It's hard for me to even hold compassion right now. And I want to have a conversation, and I want to be able to have it with you. What will it take? When can we have it? And that has looked like a lot of different things, from individual conversations to programs where people were in conversation on Zoom rooms similar to this one, and with breakout rooms. And we relaunched our high school program for alumni online. And it's both hard and essential. And so I think the most effective pieces of our work it always comes back to the relationship, because that's what pulls people back into the space when they want to walk away or when they don't want to come back to the table.
Yeah, being part of those, having that opportunity to reconnect, to keep going, definitely supports that work. I can't imagine having gone through the program, just kind of being out there and not being able to constantly reconnect. And so the alumni programs, I know for me as an individual, are really, really important, and an opportunity to keep growing and stretching and being compassionate and seeing other people in a way that we don't see every day. I think that's one of the beauties of NewGround, is the power of the story and the ability to connect, to really truly see people that are so different than ourselves, who we may not agree on almost anything, but we can see each other as humans. How would you describe the challenges faced? It's difficult. Is it difficult to find people who are willing to take that risk, to stretch, to grow? Or is it more difficult once they're engaged to honestly confront the reality and learn to change their perceptions and form partnerships? So is it harder to find those people, or is it harder to keep them engaged once they are?
I think both of them are very difficult. And it doesn't mean that they're not worth all the investment in them. I hear a lot of concerns and dissent and saying, like, I don't even know what the point of interfaith work is. And these questions, right? And these, like, very direct challenges. And I think that the way we deal with the direct challenges is to answer them honestly and fully, and to wrestle with them. And to say, like, for instance, like right now, you hear a lot about pieces about faith washing. And the way I would define faith washing is to say, how are our people feeling, or how are people feeling like they're silenced? And so that by being involved in some kind of a faith endeavor, mixed faith endeavor, that they feel that they can't be their full authentic selves at the table. And so I mean, our folks have to, our facilitators, myself, we have to convince people that no, you actually, your full authentic self is not only welcome at this table, it needs to be at this table. That you will be honored in your full entirety, and that we are asking you to speak and tell your truth, and that you are going to hear the truth of another in their full authentic self. And so, I mean, that takes a lot of effort, and it's important. It's important to do. And when over this last month, or the month of May, I should say, especially, it was really hard. I mean, I heard a lot of people who have gone through our program who said, you failed me. I don't want to be here anymore. Or I don't feel like I have a place here. Like, this isn't working. I can't hold compassion right now. And like, how can this, these two things don't add up together. And so we really lean into relationship and say, I hear you loud and clear, and reflect back and say, you know, your voice matters, and I actually need your voice in this space right here, right now. And it is actually the process of helping people articulate their own voice that actually enriches the space when they're willing to walk back in. And sometimes people need their space. And so we give them their space, but I know that at the end of the day, it's the relationship that's going to pull people back in. And what makes us effective in some ways is essentially to reach out to people one-on-one before the meetings even happen. It's not just about standalone meetings. It's about the 2-3 hour conversation that happened before the meeting with individuals walking into the space or whatever that is, because people feeling and knowing what the right questions are to ask are essential. And so through that process of talking to people, we started figuring out, okay, like what we're hearing over and over again is that people feel erased. They feel like they don't have a place in this space, or people feeling erased, period, whatever the space is. And so the question we posed was, please describe the ways that you are feeling erased right now, and having people describe them in their own words, in their own stories, and really drawing them out. And then having people reflect back to them and say, here's what I heard. And in that process, when we feel seen, when we feel heard, and when we're able to articulate what somebody else is hearing or needing to feel heard and seen by, that's when we start to do the really meaningful work that helps us not only stay at the table, but figure out what on earth we can do together.
Yeah, I think perhaps that when people hear NewGround described, that they may feel like we're trying to solve something. And I know as an alumni, that was what you talked about being seen and being heard. Some of the deepest relationships I've developed through the NewGround network, we may not agree at all on what our idea about Israel-Palestine is, but we can still deeply, deeply connect because we're willing to hear each other's stories. And that's not always easy, to just listen and not jump in and not try to change somebody's mind, but that's the skills that we learn that I think are so important just everywhere today. It's not just in this conversation. People all around the country are not feeling seen or heard. And if only we could take some of these things to the broader society. So one of the traditions of NewGround is the community iftar. It's been one of the largest gatherings of Muslims and Jews to break the fast together. When it's been able to be held in person, it's been at a large temple in Los Angeles, which has been a cornerstone of the interfaith community here in LA. How did you hold iftar during the time of COVID? How did you pivot? How did you make that work?
You know, we were supposed to be at we've been alternating synagogues over the last several years, and we were supposed to be at a synagogue. We had all the plans going, and then all of a sudden it was clear that we were not going to be able to convene in person. And so we took a risk and we said, okay, like, let's do this online. Usually we have somewhere between a little over 400, close to 500 folks attend this event. And it was definitely a success. We asked people to come having broken their fast, and then there are these other important pieces to it. And so it's possible, and we did it 2 years now, and I cannot wait for us to come back to be together in person again. There's just something different about it. And so if you can picture this, like lots of different Muslims, Jews, and allies from all sorts of different faith communities who are just willing to break bread together, to learn alongside each other, to appreciate each other's traditions, and because we'll highlight different folks from different perspectives within the Muslim community and within the Jewish community. So you actually start to taste and feel and see that we're different. Like even within our own communities, we're not the same. Like there's so many differences, and we can truly cherish and honor those differences. And then we have a space for Jews to pray, a place for Muslims to pray, and then like round tables where you have alumni who have gone through our program who are willing to facilitate a conversation with prompts. So you have a table of 8 to 10. And so it's really about the experience of being able to actually talk to different people. And so it's a lot of fun, and I cannot wait for it to be in person again instead of online. But this year, I highly recommend checking it out. It's still relevant. It's on our Facebook page, and we'll also make sure to put it in the chat. And you'll see the call to prayer from 3 different synagogues in Los Angeles. And see kind of the hundreds of comments of people on Facebook as they're like welcoming and greeting each other, because really it's about that warmth, and that's when we're there for each other and we're welcoming each other and we're truly appreciating wanting to be together. And I think that's the hallmark for me of the iftar.
Absolutely. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and turn it a little more on you, a little more personal. Give us a little bit of your personal background, and when and how did you come to NewGround, and why? Where did this all come from?
So NewGround is a place that has convened by so many people with vision, people who have seen the challenges and the pains of interfaith work gone awry, where the best of intentions really hurt a lot of people that they cared about and themselves. And so I came to the NewGround table because so there are these there's this Jewish couple, Wally Marks, may he rest in peace, and Susie Marks, who's still with us, just had a vision, and they wanted to do something that mattered, and they wanted to get under this gridlock of not being able to talk to each other anytime something happened in the Middle East, and they wanted to be able to build community. And so it was a collaboration between Jews and a Jewish organization and a Muslim organization, the Progressive Jewish Alliance and the Muslim Public Affairs Council. And I was hired as the Muslim facilitator along with Malka Fenivesi, who's hired from DC. And we both relocated. I lived in Kansas. And she did the drive coming out from DC. And so, but the reason why I arrived in this work was, I was born in Amman in Jordan, and my dad's Palestinian, Muslim, mom Caucasian, Midwestern. She's a Methodist, and I just remember these stories of when my dad would tell us at night, and we would always ask him for our evening stories, and he would always talk about when he was 4 years old. Like there were these fruit trees in this little tiny village of Khubab, and his belly always ached when the fruit trees came in season because they tasted so good, and he always ate too much of them. That it was, green and plenty of dirt to play in, and like this cow that used to chase him, and like all these things, and it was just like mythical. It was so beautiful. And then he would also describe that, when he was roughly 5 years old, everything changed, and that they literally had to things weren't safe around them in this little tiny town. His cousin disappeared. They didn't know where he went, and they thought he was killed by a gang, and they were scared, and they were huddled up in a mill. And one night, because my grandfather had all the families, like him and his brother, and like my grandmother and all the kids were huddled up in the mill, and they were scared. And my grandfather, who's like this tough guy, or at least this is the way the story goes, like he's like, you don't mess with him, but he was like antsy and he was scared. And they hear a banging at the door of the mill, and he jumps, and the voice is familiar though. He says, Ali, don't hurt me. I'm from your friend from the kibbutz next door. And it was his friend that from the kibbutz next door that said, you guys, you are not safe here. You need to leave, and you need to leave soon. And mind you, like there's young kids in this, like huddled up in this mill. And he's like, you need to find your way towards Jerusalem, but you cannot take the short way. You're going to have to go the long way. Because there was fighting on the direct route that was short. And so they took the long way with all of those kids in tow and with very little, like they took like just what the clothes on their back and they fled. And I remember those stories, and that man saved their lives with that information. It was their relationship that saved their lives. And my dad's my dad's sister, who was younger than him, she died on that road. Like there wasn't access to medicine or whatever it was, like, and there were so many challenges. And even with the challenges, it was compassion that made a huge difference in their lives. And so I'm deeply dedicated towards this vision of what we can actually do when we're actually there for each other. My dad passed away, I don't know, probably 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. And I'm just deeply dedicated to his vision of this mythical place that means so much to my family, to me, to like these incredible stories that came alive for me, and to seeing what is possible for people to truly be able to be there for each other, to honor each other, and a vision of what's possible. Like my kids are young, and like I remember, like they ask me tough questions right now. They're asking so many tough questions, and usually it's always, Mama, is this true? And like I answer their questions. And sometimes I don't always feel prepared to answer those questions, but I answer them to the best of my ability. And I know, and usually the response is like Ramsey asked me the other day, he was like, Mama, is it true? Like was Israel created? And you know what I like, he knows now that my response is going to be, honey, like, I'm not going to be able to give you the whole history on one foot right now, but what I can give you is my family stories of how and what happened and how we're still living with things. And I see the tenderness in their faces and how our personal stories actually shift the conversation from anger into compassion. And I know that the power of compassion is solid. And if we can all just lean into it more and be willing to own our stories and hear stories of other people, it actually makes us more effective leaders to be able to talk to each other, to see each other, and to figure out how to talk. Like I know a lot of people who have said, I don't want to be here. And my challenge back is to say, you actually have the skills to be here. You have the relationship and the network to be here. You do not have the luxury to stand down right now. You must step up and speak up and be there for each other, because that's what's going to get us through this moment. And that's why I'm here. That was long-winded. Thank you for asking.
It was perfect. And again, it's another example of the work that's done in NewGround to share those kind of stories and to talk about why we're here, why it matters to us. I've shared my grandfather's story, being a Jewish woman, of him having to escape what's now Belarus during the pogroms, and understanding, his perspective of what Israel meant to him around a safe place, what way many Jews feel because of those. But until we hear the other person's story and we can humanize each other, then we can learn to talk and appreciate each other. And that's what makes the world a better place. There's without that connection and that compassion, it's just not possible. We just can't do it. And so the work that NewGround does is so important, and it's sacred work. It's very sacred work. And as we're in this courageous conversation today, everything about NewGround is about courage, and the courage to step up and put yourself out there. And so thank you for sharing that. It's really important. You and the Associate Director, Andrea, recently spoke to the Associated Press about the ongoing violence taking place in Israel, Palestine. We know it's calmed down a little bit momentarily right now, but with, over the past few weeks, it was in the news everywhere. Can you give us the most important piece of your message published there? And for the rest of people, we're going to put those links in the chat as well.
Gladly. I think I actually covered a little bit of this already, but someone this isn't quite in the piece, but the spirit of it are in all three of these pieces is that, I mean, it takes a lot to be at the table. It takes a lot to be in the conversation. And I had another person who I respect deeply about, and he asked me, he's a facilitator, and he asked me, he's like, do these moments do you find yourself really wanting to dive in deeper? Or do you find yourself wanting to run the other direction? I'm like, both, very strongly, actually, both really strongly. Like, there are moments where like, I just want to just flee the other direction. And at the same time, I know that like, we have to get through it. And that tear is the heart of our work. It's the keeping your heart open, and being willing to stick with the conversation, even when you feel the walls coming up around your heart at the same time. And so I think the heart of the messages of all three of those pieces is that it's hard to stay in the conversation, and that it is essential to stay in the conversation, and that a heart that is compassionate and wide open definitely has huge risks that, it can tear and burst open. And yet I know of no other way other than to be willing to really deeply invest further, and know that the people around me and the people that we have, that like Andrea, like Tasneem, like Sarah, like yourself, like so many others, that we actually tend and we're there for each other. And it is in the caring and being there for each other of how we continue to heal and be able to continue to be in this space together.
Yes, there's definitely some overlap between SCIC and NewGround as well, and the relationships we build and how we pull each other in. My coffee with Sarah turned into me joining SCIC and then being pulled even further to succeeding her as president. So these relationships are real, and they are deep, and they're so important. And I know that for me, just all the things swirling around, if I didn't have this place, I would really feel kind of lost. And like you said, you want to run away, you want to avoid the hard conversations. I know how some of my peers feel, and it brings up all these things, but the right thing is to run into it. And it reminds me of I don't remember what it's called, but the Japanese concept of when a piece of pottery is broken and it's repaired with gold to make it so that you have that memory that it was broken, but it's repaired into something even better. And I think that's the way we move so often with this NewGround model. You just hosted an alumni private discussion. We've kind of been talking around this a little bit about people coming together. Some private discussions on current events in Israel and Palestine. And so I'm wondering kind of how did it go, and what were some of the most surprising or significant insights that you observed?
So thank you. We've had a couple of different conversations for the folks who were professionals, and some for the high school students. The first one we had with the alumni of the fellowship, both had it had a dynamic of like there was a panel, two Palestinian perspectives, two Israeli perspectives, and to them telling their stories and having a little bit of a conversation. And then we broke people up. So it was just the Muslims in a breakout room and just the Jews in a breakout room. Because sometimes we just need to be able to build our own capacity in our own space together. And so, it was painful. The conversation was important, and it then helped us be able to reconvene another follow-up conversation with everybody the following week, where Muslims were sharing and Jews were reflecting back to them, and Jews were sharing and Muslims were reflecting back to them, but really kind of creating and reminding each other of how we can fully see and model for each other, like what's possible, but to hear each other. And I think some of the most important parts that came out of there were people's individual stories, because they offer perspective. And so, and even in continued conversations, like the Courage Accelerator has still been meeting throughout all of this. And so, with permission, I have the permission of one of our fellows who was willing to let me share one of his stories. And so Imran had mentioned that, you know, he was having trouble holding compassion for folks who would call themselves Zionists, and he was really having a hard time. And then, like, through the process and being able to do all sorts of thinking, reflecting in really specific ways, he was able to kind of reflect on a moment of one of his Jewish friends who had gone to a protest that was pro-Palestinian and wanting to be there, fully wanting to be present, but then realizing, but then in that moment, like feeling deeply vulnerable and hearing something anti-Semitic yelled and feeling and describing what it meant to be in that space and not feeling welcome and not feeling like there was a place for them, and the risks that are inherent there. And what it means to fully be there. And that moment and that perspective helped give him deeper understanding that we actually need to be able to be in these conversations, because they allow us to be able to not only hold compassion for each other differently, but also to be able to do the work and to be able to be in dialogue and be in conversation and to eventually figure out the building pieces here. And so I think more than anything, it's to me, this story highlights the importance of the experience together and being able to reflect both internally and externally, and to be able to hold perspective. My very good friend, Sarah Jawade, who really focuses on holding compassion, especially around issues of race, I think describes this really well. And she says, like anger, these strong emotions, they're not bad emotions. They're actually really essential. They're messengers. They're messengers that help us understand that something is not okay and that we need to speak up for it. The critical piece of these messengers is that we need to, like for anger especially, is to speak for it, not from it. And so our space creates an opportunity for people to reflect on their anger, to reflect on the strong frustration, to find and articulate it in ways that people can hear, and in a way that there are no additional consequences to it, like where you have the room and the space to have the grace to know that even when I say something and it comes off as of deeply offensive, that another friend will hear it, they will listen to it, and they will still challenge me on the way that I'm framing. And in that way, we can actually come out of this with a greater appreciation for how we can speak more effectively instead of just screaming truth to power in a way that's completely ineffective.
Thank you. So now for the kind of $1 million question. Given the history of the challenges and obstacles to interpersonal relationships and international peace, do you have hope for the future? I know you do, but why? And what do we need for that, to find that path forward?
Yeah, I think this is an essential question. It's one that we get asked a lot, and a lot of people in shared society work, I get asked a lot. And I think Leah Solomon has this Facebook post that I hope that you just take a look and just see what she says. But the part that spoke to me from her work is, I think hope is essential. And right now, like we have a lull, right? There's a ceasefire. And the challenge with hope is that if we just say, hope can also give us an excuse to look the other way and to say, well, things are okay right now. People aren't killing each other. Like, we can still look the other way. The most essential part of me for hope is that people are actually there for each other and that we don't give ourselves an excuse to stop caring and to have the 5 million other things take over in our lives. Like I think of like COVID-19 and what it's meant to be a mom for me in COVID-19. And that in and of itself could have made me go crazy this last year. Like all these things that are demands on our time, is that like when I think hope is essential, and sometimes when we hold it, we give ourselves an out that we don't have to put in as much of an investment in anymore. And so what gives me hope is the rising tide of voices that are saying, we need to hear each other. We need to have spaces for each other where we're really, truly sharing each other's pain, our own pain, where we have the space for everyone to be able to share their pain and to be able to authentically express it, and to be there to help pick up the pieces when we feel more broken. And so what's giving me hope is the willingness of people to sit with hard conversations and to work through them and to create space that is both meaningful and intentional and allows for our kids to have another future. There's this day school exchange. So people who go through our program are especially in all the programs, but like there's usually some kind of culminating event of something that they do together. And several years ago, one of the people decided to have there was a pair, and they decided to do a day school exchange between a Muslim day school and a Jewish day school. And so they've been doing this for the last 8+ years, where they'll go a full day at the Jewish day school, a full day at the Muslim day school, and the kids are together. And in this last bout in May, the tensions were high. And some of the Muslim kids in one of the grades that had been doing the exchange, they were describing what was happening, and somebody said something that's like there was a lot of expression of anger, and somebody said something that was clearly anti-Semitic. And one of the girls, actually a couple of the girls, all looked at each other, and they were shaking, they were angry, and it wasn't okay. They were already angry because of what was going on and feeling the injustice of it. But this was like another thing of like, and one of the girls whose family actually lives in Jerusalem, like her grandparents live there, her cousins live there. And she spoke up and she said, you know what, that's not okay. It is not okay. Like anti-Semitism, hate is not okay. And so that's what gives me hope, is that in these moments that really count, that are so deeply hard on our kids, hard on ourselves, when we don't always feel like we have all the right tools, that there's still opportunities for us to rise and to say, I see you, I see that pain that you're holding, and talking down about another group of people is not okay. There's got to be another way. And so those are the kernels that give me hope.
Thank you, Aziza. So somebody asked, the recording will be on our YouTube channel later, and I apologize because we've reached the witching hour with my dog. The people who cut our grass are here, so I'm trying to keep her quiet. One person did ask in the chat though, Aziza, is, are you be able to bring your full self into interfaith spaces? And I think that came from an idea of, so often you're the facilitator bringing the stories out for others. and I guess it's kind of a question of self-care too, is how do you navigate that?
You know, there's been an evolution for me personally. At the beginning, when Malka and I started, I wasn't bringing myself to the table. Not really. I was holding space for other people. And you know what slowly happened is where I would be convening these conversations for other people, and then things would happen where people would say things in our space and they would literally directly contradict my own family's life experience. And I felt muzzled and I started bubbling inside, literally bubbling. Eventually I talked to some other, like my co-facilitator and some other folks, and like it's almost like this moment where I just felt like I was just gonna, like, literally my lid was gonna flip. And one of the other facilitators asked me, like, how did that make you feel? And like the ability to express myself in that moment helped me finally see that, like, I felt seen and heard in a way that I hadn't been before. And I was starting to feel burnt out at that point. And being able to be in this work and take care of yourself over the long haul is essential. And so that was lesson number one, right? Self-care part. Lesson number two, Marshall Gantz, who does all this work around public narrative and, as you know, was trained with Cesar Chavez and did a lot around political organizing, etc. All this like political work too. Was meeting with some other folks that I really admire and respect who run other programs. And he asked these facilitators, he's like, well, do you share your own story? And they said, oh no, like we're about holding space for other people. And his response was to say, y'all are a bunch of chickens. If you want people to be able to share their most vulnerable pieces of themselves and to take that kind of crazy risk, you've got to be willing to do it yourself. And so I actually see sharing my own story as not only an essential part of me being able to have integrity with myself, but also an essential part of what it means to truly be able to have credibility to ask other people to be able to share their own stories. Because it's hard work. It's actually really terrifying. Like when I tell my story, and especially if it's an audience that I don't think are going to hear me very well, my knees are knocking, my heart is shaking, and you can bet it's going to take me a full week to recover from that experience, even if like I'm trying to hold it all together in that moment. And like that's the kind of stuff that like why my friends and colleagues are so important. Because we all know that like when you put yourself at that kind of risk, it can take its toll on you. And so I think that for the movement itself, whatever this is, like for the work itself, it's essential to be able to bring our full selves to the table, and for our own selves and our own integrity. It's how we actually keep it going.
Absolutely. Is there anybody else? There was no questions in the chat, but I'd like to open if you have a question for Aziza. We have a couple more minutes if you want to unmute yourself and ask that question.
I'll go.
Hi, I have a question, please. Hi, I'm Patty Heckman. I'm on the board for South Coast Interfaith Council. I'm also part of the SGI Buddhist group. In Buddhism, we're encouraged to, you know, have dialogue a lot. And our current president, international president, has, you know, kind of formed friendships around the world by meeting with various heads of state and dignitaries in countries, et cetera, et cetera. And he's always relied on dialogue. And he says a lot about the power of culture to, you know, form relationship and to really bring bring about mutual respect and understanding. I was wondering if you do any of that in NewGround to really, you know, kind of like understand a person's background and culture, and just for the sake of getting to know that person.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. I think that's part of why experiential learning is so vital. Like, whereas, I mean, there's pieces, right? And like people can bring themselves to the table. Like there's, okay, so for instance, for our iftar, we've had folks who like there'll be a group that will be singing, or there's the prayer itself, right? And like there's the religious elements, but they're also kind of a practice element that I think is essential. And then people are dressed up in like different ways, right? So like, and they'll have their different traditional dress, sometimes not, sometimes like other things, right? And so like there's those are really big parts. And then of course the food itself is a whole culinary experience, and an opportunity for questions. So like we'll have halal food catered from, say, this an amazing Persian restaurant, Hatim's, who's always super generous with us. And then we'll still have, for the folks who want got kosher, we'll have like the got kosher boxes for folks who are requesting kosher food. And like it's a conversation starter to be able to kind of understand a little bit more. And so absolutely. And like that's why it's so important to get people in front of each other, as kind of part of that exchange of culture and connection, because there's so many of those. That's how you also start to see some of the similarities and the differences very clearly, in all of our work and all of us. And then you find people like me who are deeply confusing because like you're holding multiple cultures all the time and you can like reference different things.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing your personal story. It was very inspiring, and I'm sure courageous to do that.
Thank you for receiving.
Anybody else?
I'm just going to say hello. So I know usually I can't ever stop talking. That's my usual problem. But one of my friends, and I'm really embarrassed bringing this up in front of Susan, who's had massive surgery on her leg. One of my friends offered to whiten my teeth in the office. Has anyone done in-office teeth whitening? Okay, so I've done it for patients many times. It was the first time someone did it to me. It hurts like heck.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'm embarrassed bringing it up in front of Susan, but my mouth is hurting, so that's why I haven't been talking as much. But I wanted to express my profound gratitude and my continued, honestly, it's nothing less than awe of the skills that you all help, you, Andrea, Tasneem, help to build and really inspire in your fellows. I had this experience 4 years ago. I was in a synagogue. A local synagogue was holding a parenting forum, and it was just their community, and the rabbi's a friend. So she invited me. She's like, "Hey, you're a parent. I know this is something that concerns you. Go ahead and you can come on, join." The synagogue had invited an outside speaker, so he didn't know who I was, didn't know that I wasn't part of the congregation. So the topic was bullying, and so he was talking about bullying in school campuses, and he pointed at me a couple of times because there was a few people of color, myself and 2 other congregants, and he assumed I was one of the congregants that day. So the conversation went on, and I was sitting in a room of Jewish people sharing how terrified they are, how they live. This was before the Tree of Life shooting. And they were sharing their, they didn't know I was there. They didn't know there was an outside observer there. They were sharing their deepest fears and anxieties as it relates to their children. And I remember that day, it was a game changer for me. It didn't change, when people are in conflict, the conflict continues as long as you dehumanize whoever is on the other side, right? So whatever side you pick of any disagreement, heck, when you have a disagreement with your sibling or your spouse, in that moment, that person on the other side is the devil, is somebody who's like hardly relatable. But that moment when I was in that room, I remember thinking, oh, Israel means this to this group of people. That is their truth and their lived reality. And if we can't understand people and their perspective, how are we ever going to find a way forward? Because the only way forward in Israel and Palestine is together. There are many groups of people there. No one is going to disappear and vanish. And by dehumanizing, and politics thrives on dehumanizing, which is why I think the interfaith space is so valuable. Because when we convene in faith spaces, we step into this conversation saying, I might not understand you at this moment, but I recognize and see in you the divine human spirit. I see your humanity, and out of respect, I have to find a way to honor that, right? So the two things that day I learned was perspective, and you guys, and so I have heard, you mentioned faith washing early on, and I've been around, the block a bit around the conflict. And the thing that NewGround does that's different, where I would contend that you guys are not faith washing at all, is that you guys are actually building faith within participants to walk into those difficult conversations. Like you said, Aziza, you're not asking anyone to back away or say, hey, if we pray together, things are going to be better. But you guys help build courage to see the humanity in one another. If I can see the humanity in you, then I can advocate for you to see the humanity in me, right? And the danger of not making assumptions, because that was the other part that I was missing. I had made many assumptions on, if I bring my full perspective on Israel and Palestine, my Jewish friends are going to walk away from me. And I've learned through NewGround that that was an assumption I made. So I'm so grateful for that bravery muscle that you guys help your participants and your graduates build. See, and that's me talking with teeth that hurt. I would have gone on much longer otherwise. But I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for sharing space with us and for introducing me and Susan.
Mhm.
Susan can't get rid of me now.
Yeah, I can't seem to get rid of Sarah at all, but that's okay. It's all good. So with that, we're going to kind of wrap up, but I am going to go back to Sarah because she's going to share some closing slides about upcoming programs and whatnot. But first, I want to thank Aziza so very much for being so generous of sharing your time, sharing yourself and your story. The support is obvious, that the investment in this program, that both Tasneem and Andrea are here with you, in that you've chosen to spend this time in the afternoon when I know your kids are not in school right now, to share with us the important work. And I am just so grateful and so thankful that I found my way to NewGround and how much it has meant in my life. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Sarah.
So welcome. Thank you. Sarah, you're still on mute.
Sorry. Aziza, did you want to say anything in closing, or Andrea or Tasneem? Anything? I want to give you guys a moment because I love you guys and I love hearing your voices.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm so grateful to be here, to be able to kind of reflect with you, and to be received in such an important way. Especially like this is the work, and like you laid it out so beautifully and so well. And when we're really standing side by side in ways that we're showing up, like that's really what transforms things. So thank you.
And I want to thank Susan for moderating and facilitating this conversation. This has been a really intense, it's not even a couple of weeks now, it's a month. And Susan, thank you so much for showing up and being here and having this really important conversation with Aziza. We love you for it. And Cheryl, nothing is possible without our absolutely fabulous office administrator. I am convinced she has multiple superhero capes in her closet somewhere. But Cheryl, thank you so much for putting together the Zoom and prepping the slides for us. I believe my task now is to share with you all our upcoming programs. Do we have a slide coming? Oh, here we go. Something magical is about to happen. Yes. So this Sunday, we have a program to hold space to talk about grief and loss during the pandemic. This program was dreamed up by Harold Sutherland, one of our board members from First Congregational Church in Long Beach, longtime Interfaith Council board member and friend, who just wanted us to take some time aside to acknowledge how much we have all lost, whether it's loved ones, homes, jobs, the lives we were used to living. There's this beautiful panel of chaplains, Chaplain Cheryl Folk, Rabbi Cassie Kale, Chaplain Sundus Halaki, Chaplain Jan Lee, Chaplain Tenzin Kiyosaki, and Chaplain Candace Kelly. This is not a counseling or therapy session. We didn't feel like we didn't want to leave people in a raw or open, unsupported position at the end of a 2-hour program, but we will be holding space just to acknowledge communal loss and hearing how different faith communities, how their burial practices have been impacted, how their communities have changed the way they're mourning. And then we're also going to be offering resources for folks who do need grief support. And that is Sunday, June 13th, 3 to 5 p.m. on Zoom. And the registration link is on the flyer. Thank you, Cheryl. And then I think the next one is every month we hold a Religion 101, which is led by a practitioner of the faith. It does not necessarily have to be a clergy, because we're more interested in how faith animates the lives of ordinary people like us. So our next one will be regarding the Baha'i faith. Dr. Ray Zimmerman from the Baha'is of Orange County will be sharing how the Baha'i faith animates his life on Thursday, June 24th at 7 p.m. This is also on Zoom at this moment. These are about 2 hours long. The first portion is usually the presentation, where you kind of learn the main tenets of the faith, what the faith looks like in practice for the person presenting. And then the second half is reserved for any questions participants may have. It's a really good way to, it's one of our main religious pluralism programs. So the next one is Thursday, June 24th at 7 p.m. The third event this month is scheduled for Sunday, June 27th. This is part of the promise we made to our communities on the weekend of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. We made a commitment to remember that honoring his dream is not a one-day activity, but it's a year-long endeavor, and that we still are not where we need to be as communities. And every month we're holding one installment of the Dr. King's Dream series, where we explore and unpack how systemic racism impacts one aspect of our communities and policies. So this month will be on healthcare. So understanding and addressing racial disparities in healthcare. The speaker is this wonderful human being, Dana Sherrod. She's a perinatal equity manager. And when I first learned that such a position is just needed, that itself is pretty mind-blowing. The fact that we live in a world where we need a perinatal equity manager really makes you think. So she is a lead for an organization called Cherished Futures for Black Moms and Babies with the Public Health Alliance of Southern California. So she will help us understand how bias shows up in healthcare. So that is Sunday, June 27th, 3 to 5 p.m. Yes, and this is where I thank everyone so much for participating with us today, for showing up, whether you are watching this recording on YouTube or whether you joined our Zoom here to have this intimate conversation with Aziza of NewGround. We really appreciate you. We are a nonprofit, and it is through the generous donations of our community members that we're able to continue doing what we do. So if you are able to, this has been a tough year, so it's always feels a little bit extra heavy asking folks, but if you're in a position to share, we would truly appreciate it, so we could continue our work and continue showing up in our communities to lift up pluralism and help cultivate communities of compassion. You can donate on the internet, www.scinterfaith.org/donate. Oh, we're super cool now. I didn't know we could text now. So if you want to donate via text, you can text the words HELP, SCIC, to the number 44321. So you can text HELP, SCIC, to 44321. And if you want to stick a check in the mail, you can still do that. Our address has changed. We moved a couple of months ago. Our new mailing address is 525 East 7th Street, Suite A202, Long Beach, California, 90813. Again, thank you all so much for being here. Cheryl, did I miss anything?
No, you did a great job, Sarah. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm reminded of, remember when I grew up watching PBS and KQED, when that slide used to come up, I felt like I was doing that. Oh, and it looks like somebody is dropping an invitation. Do you want to share that event with us? You can unmute and share it, and please let us know how to introduce yourself if you can. I don't want to mispronounce your name. Cheryl, is she able to unmute?
There we go. Okay. Hi, I'm Chaya Beckerman, and I know a few of you, and my life is enriched by having gotten to know a couple more of you during this. And I just want to let everybody know about an event in Orange County on June 20th, World Refugee Day. We're having a drive-in movie. It's sponsored by the Orange County OCJCR, Orange County Jewish Coalition for Refugees, and the details are in the chat. We're showing The Good Lie, and it's a fundraiser of sorts. It's a community gathering of sorts. It's a way of showing solidarity to refugees, and I would say I hope to see some of you there, but I'll actually be out of town. So on the occasion.
Thank you so much for sharing, Chaya, and thank you for being here. Awesome. And I think that's it, right, Cheryl?
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom and Juma Mubarak.